Think we're back now, right?
Yes, we are. It's Dr. Richard Booker from Texas and Gidon Ariel from Hebron in Israel coming at you live or recorded. It depends on when you're seeing this. Chances are recorded on YouTube. Hello, Dr. Booker. Merry Christmas to you. Or am I too late to say that?
Well, we say Chag Sameach to you for your beautiful Hanukkah week. I hope you had a good week.
I had a lovely week.
What all did you do? What all did you do for Hanukkah?
Oh my, what did I do? I think we did a lot of stuff. Last night we had a family party here by our cousins in my community of Malay Hever. After that, we did something else, I think. I don't remember. I can check my calendar if you really want.
You just you had a good time remembering the great victory of the Maccabees that enabled you to be alive today, probably.
No question about that. That's already philosophical. If my parents were a little different than they are, and their parents, am I really me? Whatever. But there's no question that as a Jew, I would not be who I am today had it not been for the Maccabees, the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, who made sure to work to fight for independence and the ideological stance that they stood for in the land of Israel. No question about it.
Well, absolutely. As a Christian man, without that victory, it's certainly likely that Yeshua would never have been born. They'd all died or assimilated. And so we can rejoice and celebrate with you, as he did in the Gospel of John, chapter 10, said he was in Jerusalem celebrating or attending or observing Hanukkah. So although it's not one of the biblical feast days, it's certainly a national day of celebration. I'm an American. I can certainly celebrate the 4th of July. That doesn't have anything to do with my faith, but it certainly has to do with my country. So yes. We celebrate with you every year as God enables us to. We had our candles we lit to remind ourselves to rededicate our lives every day anew to God, which for us is what Hanukkah is really about, not the lighting of the candles, but dedicating ourselves, getting the altar of the world off of our hearts and putting the altar of God back on there every day as best we can. So that's how we celebrate Hanukkah.
I'm really thinking about that because the word Hanukkah really does mean dedication specifically of the altar, as you said, of the temple. But the word dedication really means, in Hebrew, the word dedication is different. In other words, if I'm dedicated to something very important for me, then obviously it's the same word, dedication. But in Hebrew, the word is hitmasrut. I, as it were, or pass over myself. Pardon me for using the term Passover, but I pass myself over. I give myself over to this ideal that I am dedicating myself to. If I'm right now, I'm dedicating my life to the relationships between Christians and Jews, building such relationships.
It's a very worthy thing to be doing. Absolutely.
So I'm dedicated to that. So when you think about it, if you have a holiday that you call the holiday of dedication, then you're really saying, wow, that's something important. And really, I think a holiday is something that we celebrated once a year, one day a year, a week a year, something like that. But really, we hope that the ideas of that holiday, the impact that holiday has on us on that one day a year, it should really expand to the entire year and to our entire lives.
Well, amen.
So if we're talking about the holiday of dedication, that means that we must rededicate ourselves, whatever the ideal is that we so fit. Some people think that this is ideal, some people that is ideal. But if you're thinking about good stuff and not saying, wow, I'm going to dedicate myself to making sure that I see every single episode of Gomer Pyle. No. I don't think that that's what we should celebrate.
Our way of saying exactly what you said is to internalize the truth that the holiday is representing. So to internalize into our being a sense of presenting ourselves each day to God, letting Him be Lord of our heart and our life. And there's so many distractions in the world that we have to make I'll say a dedicated dedication to do that, because there's so many things that would try to pull us away from that. So we have to keep our focus every day. So that's why contemplating the greatness and goodness of God and His love and mercy for us is something we should do every day, because that keeps us focused. Hallelujah.
That's right. I'd like to ask you two questions.
Okay.
About Hanukkah and Christmas.
Okay.
You said you started today saying something that I hear often, and that is that as a Christian, you are happy to celebrate Hanukkah.
Okay.
Now, I have a lot of friends who do that. My Facebook is full of people like that.
Of course.
My question is, and those are the Christians that I'm close to, obviously, but you over there are close to a few 100 million Christians in the United States, or tens of millions for sure. So I have a feeling that most Christians look at that with an askew, if I may use that term, or they wonder what that means. So am I right? Like, I assume that there are still a majority of Christians that say, sure, Hanukkah, if I've ever even heard of it, okay, that's the Jewish holiday. I don't know. I'm a Christian. I have nothing to do with that. But you don't feel that way. But so when you meet a Christian who feels that way, how does that meeting go?
Well, unfortunately, what you're saying is true, that the vast majority of Christians only know the word Hanukkah if they see it around Christmas time in a magazine or in a billboard or something they happen to read somewhere on Facebook or whatever, but they wouldn't really know what it is really. And so, as you have, Peggy and I have dedicated our lives to bringing these stories alive to Christian people. I did a Zoom meeting at a local church here recently, explaining in about a 30-minute Zoom meeting what the core of what Hanukkah is and why it should be important to Christians.
Wow.
That we don't judge anybody for what they know or don't know.
Of course.
And you can't be upset with people about things they don't know, because they don't know. So you love people and you try to educate them when there's opportunity. And for Christian people, it helps if you can show them why, as a Christian person, they should be this should be important to them. Christian people, true Christian people, love Yeshua, love Jesus. They would say Jesus in English, of course.
Yes.
So if you can help them see how this would be related to Him, and then they can understand that much better and be receptive to it. So we don't judge anybody or criticize anybody. We try to help people have a fuller grasp of the scriptures and the culture and context of the life of Jesus in His time in the first century of our era. So that's why the Pilgrims, for example, didn't celebrate Christmas, because it's not in the Bible. So Uh, they were very Hebraic. They were very connected to the Jewish people. They saw
Yes.
them reenacting the Exodus story as they were fleeing England, not Egypt, but England. This both starting with an E. That's interesting. Crossing not the Red Sea, but the great ocean of the Atlantic. And they were coming for religious freedom.
Right.
They didn't have any slaves. So those who would try to rewrite American history, the Pilgrims coming in 1620, really were the founders of the new world here, America.
Yes.
Very God-fearing Hebraic type Christians. They were free people. As I said, they didn't have any slaves. They didn't have a Quran on the Mayflower. They had the Bible.
That's right.
You know, and the Geneva translation. Actually, I have one right here in my office, the Geneva Bible, translated in Geneva, of course, under the watch care of John Calvin, who protected them from the King of England, and they were able to write the Geneva Bible. It was the first Bible that actually had chapter and paragraph and numbers, made it easy for people to read. And
was that before or after the King James Version?
Before.
Really?
That's an interesting question, because the Geneva Bible became the popular Bible of the people because it was reader friendly, you might say, for that day.
Right.
Like I said, it had chapter numbers and verse numbers and kind of little paragraph headings, and it actually had footnotes trying to explain things to people. Unfortunately, for that day, the footnotes were not favorable towards the king, as you can imagine, and that is actually what led to the King James Bible.
Now I get it.
You got it. He couldn't have this Bible being so popular by all the people when it had all these anti-monarchies insinuations in it. So he said, well, I'm gonna replace it, which he did. Of course, he was successful with his own, but it's an amazing story of the history of the Bible. Any Jew or Christian should be interested, regardless of your views, of how God has protected his word. And so Tyndale, when he was being burned at the stake for the audacity of wanting to translate the Bible into the English language for everyday people, said God opened the King of England's eyes. And God answered his prayer as he was burning at the stake, because
Wow.
King James actually used Tyndale's earlier traditions as the foundation for his own King James Version. So I think.
Wait a second. Tyndale made the Geneva translation? He was the translator?
No. He was one of the first to translate the New Testament and the Bible into English. And of course, they burned him at the stake for doing such a.
That was before the Geneva Bible, even.
Yeah. So all the future Bibles in English were based on Tyndale's version, and of course, it's a lot of cloak and dagger and all of that. These people are hiding and running for their lives trying to translate the scriptures. So I try to include these people when we talk about the great debt that Christians have to the Jewish people for preserving the Bible, which we certainly understand that. I try to also include the Christian translators and martyrs, because they were burned at the stake for doing their best to get the Bible from Hebrew and Greek into the language of everyday people in the nations of the world. So how can
you have pardon the expression, religion? How can you have any faith system without the document that you can look at? I just can, as a Jew, I just cannot fathom that.
Well,
And you're talking about 1,500 years or so.
You got to have your holy book to be able to read it.
Right.
But they're always the establishment, the establishment. They have their agenda, and sometimes they don't want you to read your holy book, because you might find out something they've told you is not actually in there are correct. So the establishment sometimes, I'm going to say it that way, has a vested interest in keeping you ignorant, because they want you to come to them for the answer.
Bread and circuses.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So the Pilgrims, they came with the Geneva Bible, and it had all these. It's amazing. It had a major role in the independence of of America from England, because all of these footnotes, or so many of them, talked about personal responsibility. You had to have your personal faith. You couldn't inherit your parents' faith. You couldn't have the faith of the church state. You had to have personal faith in your God, and from a Christian in Jesus, and responsibility and freedom, and you have the opportunity to make something of yourself by studying the scriptures and finding God's plan for your life. Well, all of these are very radical ideas to a king. And so when the reformers, the George Whitfields and the people like them, came and preached in America, they're preaching from this Geneva Bible about freedom and liberty. Well, this is a threat to a king, but this stirred the colonies more than anything.
And that is why there's so much anti-Semitism, because it was all initiated with, it all started with the Jews and the Bible. When you read "Proclaim liberty to the throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof," that is something that, wow, you put it on the Liberty Bell, and wow, it didn't happen before 1776. But the Jews have been reading that since 1776 BC.
That's right, from Leviticus, of course.
Right.
And so we have a lot of, I have a teaching on the Hebraic origins, Hebraic Christian origins of America, and it's a story that is not known by Christian people or American people. So a lot of my books, I have many chapters explaining these things, So we just.
I'd like to get back. I love what you're saying. But I'd like to get back to my question of, you're saying that if people don't know about Hanukkah, then you explain it to them, and it's easy, not easy, but it's sometimes there's fertile ground for people to say, yeah, that makes sense. But what about the people who say, wait a second, that can't be true? If all I know is Easter egg and Christmas trees. You're one of those Judaizers or something like that? Do you come across people like that, or do you remember coming across people like that?
That would be most people.
Oh, so tell me about that kind of encounter.
Well, again, if they're a true Christian believer, they want to know about Jesus. He's what they're interested in.
So you're saying there are a lot who aren't true Christian believers. They just want to know what they know, and don't tell me other things.
There's a lot of truth to that, but if you can show how the Hebraic roots of our faith are really connected to Jesus, then they have an interest. not everybody will. Of course, some people just have hard hearts, but if they're really wanting to learn, there are ways that are more palatable to approach people.
Yes.
And you meet people where they are, not where you want them to be.
Now, I said that I have two questions. So my other question is you said before something that I heard also often is that without the Maccabees, without Hanukkah, then there would be no Christians, because Jesus was a Jew who celebrated Hanukkah. He celebrated Hanukkah because that was, if you will, the War of Independence for the Jewish people at that time. Had they not won their independence, they would have been totally assimilated into the Greek nation, if you will, and there would have been no Jews. Then there's no Jesus, because Jesus was a Jew, right? That's pretty much the story.
That's the bottom line of the story.
But I have a question.
Okay.
How could there not have been Jesus? It was the very beginning of the world. God, I'm talking about from the way I understand that believers in Jesus say he for sure he had to come. So how can you say there would be no Jesus?
God is sovereign and orchestrates world history. So he made sure. You've seen the video series Against All Odds. How can there be an Israel in 1948 unless God was helping? It's impossible for Israel to be born without God's help in 1948. It's impossible. People may not acknowledge that, but it's impossible. So it was impossible for the Maccabees to win against against Antiochus and these. Can you imagine? You're a little band of rebel fighters, and here comes these warring elephants into your village, with all this armor on these huge elephants, and these guys up on top of the elephants, throwing their arrows and spears at you, and you're just.
And all I have is a rugatka.
You're just
how do you say that? A slingshot.
And keep from getting killed, yet somehow you win. Come on now, it's no way.
There was, I don't know if you've heard of this. It was popular when I was a kid, and I think for many years before also. And since then, the comic strip called I'm forgetting it. Heck. Oh yeah. He was in Gaullus or something like that. He was Asterisk. Did you ever hear of the comic strip Asterisk?
No.
So you look that up. It was a story of a small group of people who were somehow able to stand strong against the Romans, who were taking over the entire Roman Empire.
Okay.
And it happened, surprise, surprise, to have been created by two Jews, Holocaust survivors, also in France, and they based their comic books. Very, very popular comic books. You should look it up. Asterix. It's like an asterisk, just an X at the end instead of an SK. Here, I'll look it up while I was talking about it. Here. So one second. They were talking about the Jews also. So here, let me see if it's something worth sharing my screen about. Let's put up the Wikipedia over here. Let me share the screen here for a second. This we don't need, and this we don't need either. It's a comic book series about indomitable Gaulish warriors who fight the Roman War.
Okay.
And it was written by a fellow by the name of Goscinny and Erduzzo. And I'll bet if I quickly do Control Find here, we will find the word Jew. Yes. There you go. All about Jews. That's what we're talking about over here.
I understand.
That's what we're thinking. Anyway, So I highly recommend. It's a lot of fun. Also, those comic books. I read them. I found them when I came to Israel. So
So
that I recommend.
the bottom line is of your questions, I think, is because of centuries of Greco-Roman Christianity, most Christian people who love the Lord and well-meaning are just not aware of the Jewish origins of Christianity. They're not anti-Semitic. They just don't know. But if you can present the Jesus story in a way that helps Christians discover the Hebraic connection he had that comes down to us through a relationship with him, then this is something Christians can embrace.
I think Time Magazine, just before the turn of the millennium in 1999, maybe they wrote a magazine. You remember, of course, Time Magazine. I don't know if it's still around. And they said the great big ideas that are coming soon. I don't remember if they had one issue dedicated to all these great ideas, or they had a whole year long bunch of ideas. But the idea that I remember, and I wonder if you do also, the Jewishness of Jesus. That was the big idea that Time Magazine said is coming. Let me look that up.
I don't remember it.
Let's see if
that'd be interesting.
So far I don't see it. Let me see if I've got
I don't remember writing that article for Time Magazine.
Not that. That does not look like it. I don't know. I can't see it right now, so I'm not going to. Hey, excuse me. Maybe it is. Sorry, there's a bunch of. Believe it or not, there's a bunch of life of Time Magazine covers that had Jesus on them. Surprise, surprise. But the one that I'm looking for, I don't see. So, whatever. I'd like to introduce another topic, if I may.
Sure.
Today was a one, as far as I'm concerned, a one news story day in Israel. And that is because a certain rabbi, a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Chaim Druckman, passed away. He was 90 years old. He celebrated his 90th birthday a month or so ago. And he was clearly the leading rabbi of the religious Zionist camp.
Okay.
And I didn't study in his yeshiva, but he ultimately became the president of all of the Zionist yeshivas. And so I spent my day, I decided not to go to his funeral. Instead, nowadays you can watch a funeral on Zoom. So that's what I did. But his funeral was 3 hours long. And people just kept on talking about how important he was to the entire history of the state of Israel and how much he had changed the face of the state of Israel because he brought pride to people who believed in God, believed in the religious aspect, the ideological, spiritual aspects of the state of Israel. And today, that is something that is pretty much accepted by most religious people and even most non-religious people in Israel. So it was really amazing. It's really something that I highly recommend that you look that up. I gave you a little bit of homework today. Asterix, and Rabbi Chaim Druckman. I will mention both of them on the notes of our meeting today?
Well, the original land grant connecting the people and the land was not from the United Nations
Of course not.
or the Balfour Declaration, but in the book of Genesis. So if you want to be a true Zionist, you have to have the spiritual component as well as the national and political side of it.
Exactly right. And that's very much what I believe, and that's very much what you believe, I think. And that is why I am so attracted to my Christian friends who share that identity, I think.
Well, I went to Opan some years back and in Israel. It was interesting. Of all the people on the campus, because I'm a Christian minister,
Yes.
me and one other person, a Jewish lady, Orthodox Jewish lady, we were the only Zionists on the entire campus.
How do you like that?
I was shocked. But because of that, we became best buddies. Not to mention she helped me with my homework because she was advanced. She was advanced Hebrew classes. But I was shocked that here I am at a language school learning Hebrew in Israel, and we were the only Zionists on the campus. It was
You remember her name, perhaps?
I'd rather not say, but
Okay.
yeah. So, but we were obviously Zionist soulmates, and actually were clinging to each other because we were the only ones who were like-minded in this way.
Amazing. Well, look, if anybody ever asks you about your Zionist, your current Zionist friend, please do not hesitate to tell them my name.
Well, I certainly will. Absolutely, not a problem.
Anyway, so tomorrow night, it's already Tuesday night, I'm going to my son's big event. It is a annual gala, I guess, celebrating the Temple Mount. We will be, I think I mentioned this to you in previous weeks, we will be commemorating the life of Gershon Solomon, who was the leader of the Temple Mount faithful. So we'll be talking about him, of course.
I met Gershon several times. In fact, we were both speaking at our dear friend Jody Anderson's conference in Fort Worth one year. And I gave my speech about Christians and Jews. And he actually came up to me after that and said how much he appreciated and enjoyed the truth of my presentation.
Right.
So I felt honored that this man was so admiring my presentation, you know.
Oh, I'm sure. Tov. Anyway, so that's what's going on. I mean, how are you doing, sir?
We're doing great. Peggy's doing great. She's getting out and actually, first time in 2 years.
Wow.
Walking some of the paths, trails on our property for about 15
Wonderful.
to 20 minutes. It's like a miracle.
Really?
We are so grateful to the Lord that she's doing so much better. We have no known reason for this other than God helping her.
Well, I'm grateful as well.
Thank you.
I'm continuing to pray.
Praying.
Anyway, have a great week. Let me see if next week anything is going on. My schedule is getting busier and busier, it seems. 1 second. It looks okay. Hopefully nothing will come up, and we'll be meeting each other next week as well.
Okay, well, tell me about your meeting next week that you have tomorrow with your son.
I mostly will. Oh, and hundreds of other people as well.
All right, shalom.